Welcome to the Scale the Chaos podcast, where we talk all things contributing to your organization's chaos and dysfunctions. I'm Rhonda Lea, founder and owner of Scale the Chaos. Today's guest is Sheryl Green, a how to say no expert. She is also the author of the book You Had Me at No. Welcome, Sheryl.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to do this.
I'm excited to have you here. I know we'll have an amazing conversation. And I love that you tell people to stop getting yes to death. Tell me how you became a boundaries expert and what journey brought you here.
Burnout is the really quick answer. Back in October of 2021, I had to shift gears during COVID, as many of us
Mhm.
did. I was running a business doing content writing and some ghostwriting. And overnight, my clients just disappeared, as many people
Mhm.
experienced. At the time, I had been working part time for an animal rescue that I'd volunteered for years and served on the board, all the things. And when COVID hit, I spoke to the founder and I said, I need to come full time. And I did. Of course, if you've ever worked in the nonprofit world, you need to realize that full time is not 8 hours a day, it's
Mhm.
12 hours a day. And no one goes into animal rescue for the paycheck. Let's just put it that way. So when my clients started coming back, I had to take them. I
Mhm.
wanted to do
Yeah.
my business, but I also wanted to keep a roof over my head and food in the dog's dish. So I started working on the clients in the evenings. And at this point, my parents are getting older. They're needing more and more of my attention. I'm still volunteering for a couple of different organizations. I'm there for all my friends, everything that, all the
Mhm.
hats that we wear. And I started getting really overwhelmed. I started crying constantly. I was falling behind in all of my work, couldn't get a sentence out without tears coming. And to be honest, I drank more in 1 week than I have really ever. It's never been a thing for me. And I found myself drinking like 4 nights in a row just out of stress. And one day I was driving down the road, I was running an errand for the rescue, and I saw the oncoming headlights. And I had this split second thought of, I just crossed over this median, everything could just be over.
Wow. Yeah.
Thankfully, spoiler alert, I'm still here.
Yeah.
But thankfully, it just scared the crap out of me. It really
Yeah.
did. I pulled off the road. I didn't want to hurt myself. I certainly didn't want to hurt anybody else. And I didn't want to leave my parents or my dog without anyone.
Mhm.
I took a month off from the rescue. I cleared everything non essential off my plate. I just completely cleared it off and I focused on my mental health. And about 6 months later, I was doing better. I never ended up going back to the rescue, but I was doing better, but my plate was full again.
Mhm.
And I couldn't figure out what was happening. It was like everything came back and all the responsibilities brought friends. And thankfully, a friend mentioned a book on boundaries to me at the time. And I started reading and I was like, oh, I don't have these. Cool.
Yeah.
So,
What even are these? This is a thing?
exactly.
Yeah.
So it kicked off this journey and I learned through writing. That's just how I process. So I figured I can't be the only person out there that has this problem. And I'm going to write a book about it and I'm going to figure it out as I go and interview people way smarter than me. And I did. So that's how I got to the book and that's how I got on this crazy boundary journey.
And that's amazing. I know that there are a lot of people who have similar burnout stories. I call them come to Jesus moments. Let's dive into boundaries in the workplace and how it is that they contribute to dysfunctions. Talk to us about what you define as boundaries in a professional setting.
Boundaries in a professional setting, the same definition, just different examples.
Hmm.
It's how we allow others to treat us and
Okay.
by extension, our stuff. When you look at it, and I like to explain it in something that you can see, something tangible. Think about the boundaries that surround your house. Okay,
Hmm.
whatever that is. Maybe it's a fence, maybe it's a shrub line, maybe you're in an apartment and it's hallways, whatever. Um, there's a very clear line where someone else ends and you begin.
Hmm.
And it's pretty easy to think in our heads, like, hey, it would be weird if I came home and my neighbors were in my house, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
That would be very unless you're friends and you've got that.
Mhm.
But it's very easy to see it in those terms of this is my space. And if you come into it without asking, then we have an issue. It's not quite as easy when it comes to personal or professional boundaries. And when you talk about a workplace, that can look like your time. Are you spending your free time, your time off on work things, work assignments?
Yeah.
Are you answering your phone and answering questions at
Yes.
o'clock in the morning? How do you expect to be spoken to? There are some culture, like some work cultures where screaming is completely acceptable and
Yeah.
understood. And then there's other, I go into shell shock if you yell at me and I will
Hmm.
like curled up
Hmm.
in position.
Yeah.
Boundaries are a very personal choice and they
Hmm.
differ from person to person. However, we all need to have a set of expectations or a set of rules that we have people play by in our space.
Yeah. To me, the key word is allow. How we allow others to treat us. Because I think most people view, especially work relationships, is the way that people treat me is the way that they choose to treat me. And it leaves all of the control up to the other person and it completely leaves us powerless. And it also leaves us in somewhat of a victim mindset. And so I really love that it empowers us and it gives us that control back of how we're going to be treated, how we're going to allow other people to treat us.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit more about how the lack of these boundaries contributes to chaos and dysfunction, especially these cultures. You talked about there are some cultures where screaming is allowed or is the norm. I've worked in some cultures where some people were allowed to throw temper tantrums and everybody else is expected to bow down to them. And so let's talk a little bit more about how it's contributing to the dysfunction.
When you think about it, when you go back to how you allow yourself to be treated, if you're a leader out there, how do you allow your team to be treated? Are you
Yes.
allowing customers or clients to just step all over them or have you
Hmm.
got their backs? So when you think about that kind of interpersonal relationship between a team, a couple of things that can come up if one person is the people pleaser of the
Hmm.
group
Hmm.
and they're gunning for a promotion, they want to feel good about themselves, they want to be the hero. We've all experienced this at some point where we're like, yes, I can do that. Absolutely. It's going to be like so good. I'm
Uh-huh.
going to help. Yay, I can save the day.
Yeah.
But then you've got another employee who is just fine to sit back and let somebody else do their job.
Mhm.
And it may work for a short period of time, but you're going to have growing resentment
Mhm.
and so much anger. So now you've got issues between employees. And
Mhm.
when you think about from a burnout standpoint of we need to shut off, we need to shut down. No one can go 24/7. It's why our computers and our phones malfunction after a while when you don't
Mhm.
reset them. We need to take that time off to go home at the end of the day and shut off the cell phone, to take vacations, things like that. When we don't, we get overwhelmed, we get depressed, our productivity slides, our attitudes for sure. I was
Mhm.
not pleasant that last
Mhm.
month at the rescue. I was not a pleasant person to be around. So now we're poisoning the well with our with
Mhm.
negative attitudes.
Yeah.
There's so many ways that not having healthy boundaries set up within the organization from
Uh-huh.
the leader standpoint and from the employee standpoint, it just spells disaster.
You brought up a couple of different areas and that I want to cover or at least start to cover. Well, the first one is you talked about protecting your team. As a business leader, as a manager, there are things that you can do to protect your team and maybe start identifying those signs of burnout if somebody is starting to show those signs of stress. But also number 2 as the individual employee, what is it that they can do because maybe they don't have a manager who is protecting their boundaries or is on the lookout for those signs of burnout. What can they do? So let's first talk about as a manager, what can we do? Because I am a mama bear manager and I have to be really careful because I get in this mode of my team can do no wrong, which is funny because they absolutely can. That kind of idea that managers, how can they help protect their teams? And then How can they look out for those signs of burnout?
Yes. Okay. I'm going to try and tackle all of that.
Sorry. Yeah.
No, you're good. You're good. The first thing I would say is lead by example.
Yes.
A lot of managers, a lot of leaders, they talk a really good talk. You need to take time off. You need to not be available at
Yeah.
24/7. You need your vacation, blah, blah, blah. But your employees are watching you come in at 6 o'clock in the morning, not leave until 10 o'clock at night, and basically like sleep and die at your desk. So you're doing this say as I, or do as I say, not as I do kind of thing.
Hmm.
And employees are going to pick up on that, whether it's conscious or not. They're going to be thinking to themselves, if they're doing it, that must mean I should be doing it, or I'm not worthy of working here,
Hmm.
worthy of being promoted, whatever.
Yeah.
First thing is really make sure your own boundaries are
Yes.
intact and strong. And the second thing would be keep your ears open and keep your heart open. And I know that sounds weird from a leadership
Hmm.
standpoint, but if your employee comes to you once and doesn't feel heard, they're never coming to you again.
Yes. Oh, that's very good. Absolutely. We can all think of certain situations where we've come to somebody and not been heard and have thought, I'm never going to do that again." Obviously, if somebody comes to you as a manager and you don't listen, you've lost their trust
Yeah.
in a way.
I remember the very first and the very last time I ever spoke up to my manager at the rescue, she threw a hissy fit. Did I approach it correctly? Probably not. This is years ago. I wasn't the evolved version of me now. But she did not handle it well, and my another coworker had to talk her off the ledge because she almost fired me on the spot. I never went to her again. I kept
Yeah,
my mouth shut with my problems until eventually my problems were too loud to
to
ignore.
ignore.
So listen to your employees when they come to you, even if it's not something you can fix right away. Listen to them, do some fact finding.
Mm.
Maybe they're overwhelmed because they're still doing some project or something that they don't need to be doing anymore.
Mhm.
You just don't know because you're stuck
Busy with
doing your work. Use it as an opportunity to learn more about them, about their role, about their load, and then do whatever you can to help when
yeah.
they're a good employee.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Especially if they're a productive employee and you start seeing these behaviors that are not typical, especially I would think. You sit them down and you have to do it delicately, right? You don't want to pry. You still have to have boundaries and trying to help them have boundaries. But yeah, find out what additional support you can offer to them because oftentimes that type of behavior is a cry for help even though it's not seen like that, it's seen as belligerent and all those other things and rude and uncivil and all of that. And obviously it is, but oftentimes symptom of a deeper problem, right? So let's talk about how the individual employee, maybe they don't have a manager who is protecting their boundaries or a manager who themselves has no boundaries. They are the ones that are working all hours of the night, answering phone calls. So they expect their team members to do that. And that's what is demonstrated as a dedicated team member, right? So, what types of things can people do that won't cost them their job?
So I'm going to answer this in a way that some people may not like.
Okay.
There's a whole bunch of things that they can do, and we're going to talk about that in a moment.
Okay.
However,
Yes,
it also gets to a point where maybe that's not the right job for you.
that's true. Very, yes. Yes.
Maybe it's not
And
the
some,
right
yeah.
and yeah.
And for some, there are other opportunities,
Yes.
right? But I know, especially in a time where the employee market may be low, it may be really difficult to find another job, cost of living is going up. You gotta feed the kids and keep
Yes.
a roof over your head, right? So, what about those who don't necessarily have the luxury of jumping ship to a different ship?
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting anybody jump ship.
Yeah.
Like, do not listen to this podcast and go
And go
quit.
quit your
Like, don't
job.
do that. Don't do that. I'm just saying,
Right.
maybe keep your eyes open.
Exactly. Yeah. Maybe
Um,
start looking, but
yes,
in the
yes,
meantime,
but
yeah.
do not jump ship.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it comes down to recognizing your own abilities, limitations, your own, how do I put this? Kind of your own requirements.
Mm-hmm.
So if you got into a job that was 70% travel and you accepted
Mm-hmm.
this, you were
Mm-hmm.
excited to travel, but now a year, 2, 5 years later, you've got a different home situation.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you have a young kid, maybe you have an old parent, maybe you've got a sick relative, like you're taking care of somebody.
Yeah.
It's time to reevaluate, and it's time to go to your manager or to HR or to whoever's your next report and say, look, stuff has changed on my side.
Yeah.
What can we do? I value this job. I love this company, whatever it may be. What can we do so that I can continue working here because this role doesn't work for me anymore? I think the biggest thing that you can do after you figure out what it is you want and what it is you can handle is having those conversations.
Mm-hmm.
We can set all the boundaries we want in our head,
Yeah.
but nothing becomes real until we actually talk to someone. When it comes to things that you do to yourself, and I'm raising my hand as I say this, but if you're one of those people that volunteers for all the things,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
stop.
Yeah.
Okay, you are creating your own boundary problems. I
Yes.
created mine.
Yes.
So when someone says, "Hey, we need somebody to do this," just don't raise your
Yeah.
hand. Like, how much of this situation, how much of the current challenge that you're facing is something that you have brought upon yourself? And I know we don't like to hear that.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, yeah.
but what have we done to ourselves? And can we stop doing right off the bat?
Absolutely. And I like to think of it as giving somebody else the opportunity for the growth, right?
Yes.
Don't hog all the opportunities. Don't hog all the growth for yourself. Let somebody else in the office have it as well. Absolutely. So, can you give us some examples of common boundary issues that people may not initially see or perceive as boundary issues? Obviously, we recognize working overtime, answering email and phone calls and text messages after hours, right? Those are obvious. Maybe somebody coming into your office without being invited or without permission. But what are some of the common things that people actually don't recognize as boundary issues?
The first one that comes is oversharing or
Okay.
being
Yeah.
asked to overshare. We love to gossip as humans, right? We
Hmm.
like to know
Yeah.
everything, the whole spill the tea, which I just
Yes.
heard recently. And I was like, is that actually a thing? But we want to know what's going on in each other's lives. And to a certain degree, that's a good thing.
Yes.
You're
Yes.
spending 8 to 10 hours a day with these people. You might as well have some sort of connection and
Yes.
for them. However, when you're either oversharing with people and you're making them uncomfortable, maybe you're just giving out too many details of your life.
Hmm.
And I will never forget this. I worked for Hot Topic in college, and I had a manager who would come in every Monday and share, I called them his sexcapades. He would come in every Monday and tell us all about what and who he did
Ooh.
over the weekend.
Oh, yeah. No.
And
TMI.
seriously, but I'm 18, 19
Yeah.
at the time. So I'm like, hey, I'm just
Yeah.
getting really red. But I was super uncomfortable. I didn't know that I could speak up and that I could say anything.
Mhm.
So you've got that kind of oversharing. And then you've also got the people who are probably asking out of concern. And it's not necessarily that they have these negative motives,
Mhm.
but people want to know what's going on in your life. Oh, hey, you were out for a week. Were you sick? Is somebody? And you may not feel comfortable saying that.
Yeah.
You may not be comfortable sharing that, opening up that side of your life. Sure, we'll go with
Yes.
that. Being able to say, you know what, thank you for your concern. I'm really not comfortable talking about that. How was your weekend?
Yes.
Thank them for their concern if they're being appropriate. If they're being
Uh-huh.
inappropriate, that is not necessary. Thank them, acknowledge that they're asking you something and that you're not comfortable or you're not willing to talk about it, and then just deflect, change the topic. That's one of the first things that comes to mind. But I would say, again, boundaries are very personal to
Mhm.
the individual. If you look back on an experience at work and like
Yes.
your throat clenches, your stomach feels uneasy, your heart
Yes.
starts to,
Uh-huh.
to palpitate. If you get these physical reactions to something that happened, look into it because there's a really good chance there was a boundary violation
Yeah.
there and you didn't recognize it at the time, and that's okay, because the wonderful thing about boundary violations is they keep coming. So we get to learn and we get to reevaluate how we can respond and how we can handle it. And then we get to do better next time.
One of the reasons that it's so easy to overlook some of these boundary violations is because we tend to give people the benefit of the doubt. We don't want to assume that they intended any sort of malice and that they really did have genuine intentions, right? So we want to give them that benefit of the doubt, and yet we then allow them to violate those boundaries. So if somebody were to find themselves in that situation and maybe they aren't very well versed or comfortable in communicating these boundaries, what are some nice ways that they can communicate their boundaries to somebody who clearly isn't intentionally violating their boundaries, but they clearly are?
Yeah. So first, I would say just the gentle, "Hey, you know what? I'm not comfortable with that. Or I feel this way when you do X." Just being gentle with it and explaining, and it's not you made me feel this way or
Mhm.
you did this to me, because then we're instantly on the defensive.
And that's good to, yeah, point out.
That's huge. If you go barreling into a conversation like, you did this and it's,
Yeah.
screwed me over, like you're gonna lose the
Yeah.
person maybe. But when it's the I feel this way, same thing with relationships. When you did this, I felt this way.
Yeah.
Or when this happened, I was upset, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So that you're really putting the onus on you.
Mhm.
This is me. And sometimes this has been going on for a long period of time kind of conversation.
Yeah.
And then it becomes I know this has always been acceptable and I've never said anything before.
Yeah.
However,
Yeah.
I'm evaluating, I'm working on myself, I'm more careful with my time, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then, you know what? I'm no longer willing to do this. I'm no longer available for this type of conversation. Recognizing that, yeah, I know I've let this go on for a long
Mhm.
time
Mhm.
and it doesn't matter because it ends
Yeah.
now. And I will be honest, I had a conversation like that with my mom a couple of weeks ago. And I was so
Wow.
proud of myself, right? Because
Yes.
like the hardest ones.
Uh-huh.
But I said, I've realized that for the past 40 something years, this has been acceptable.
Yeah.
And now that I'm learning more, and now that I'm learning to speak my mind and to stand up for myself, this is no longer okay. And I will no longer be
Yeah.
accepting it. And I was nice, I was respectful, but she actually took it well.
Well, that's good.
So get rid of that fear that everything is automatically going to end up in fiery flames. I'm reading, actually, it's right here. I'm reading Crucial Conversations right now.
Yes. Yep.
Awesome book.
Awesome book. Yes.
And they talk about the fool's choice.
Mhm.
And the fool's choice is this assumption that you can either speak up or you can maintain a relationship.
Yes.
And we do this with boundaries. I can either set a boundary
Uh-huh.
or I can keep my job or I can
Or
keep.
yes.
So we have to get out of that mindset so that we can have productive conversations and we can protect ourselves.
Yeah. Do you have any suggestions or recommendations for people who they communicate their boundary, they do it in a nice, respectful way, but it's not well received? What can they do in that instance? Because that's everybody's worst fear. I feel like if we can address the worst fear and give everybody strategies for that, I feel like people would be more inclined
Yeah.
to communicate them.
The first thing I would say, and so I've been researching for my next book,
Mhm.
and this is what I've heard a lot, is that people new in the company, new in the field, they've got almost a boundary mentor. They've got a mama bear.
Mhm.
And they have somebody that they work with that's been through it all, that's dealt with all of this, that's had the horrible conversations, and that now has the skills and the confidence to speak up. And these mama bears are helping them,
Mhm.
are saying like, hey, you know what? First, they're pointing out that was actually a boundary violation.
Yeah.
Like, I know it didn't bother you in the moment, but that's something we
Yeah.
need to address. And they're also either joining them for the conversation so that they can help it along, or they're having the conversation for them. And that kind
Oh,
of sounds
yes.
like a weak way out, but in the beginning,
Yes.
however you need to set boundaries, do it. And if that means someone else needs to
Help
kind of
you.
step in there, maybe they have
Yeah.
a better relationship with the person and can say, hey, I know you didn't mean anything by it, but that wasn't okay what you did to, Sam or
Yeah.
whatever. That's part of it. And the other is just, again, the I statements and getting clarity. If it is something where maybe you've taken on a ton of other assignments and other projects that are not your responsibilities, asking those questions and saying to your supervisor, your manager, hey, you know what? I want what's best for the company. I really do.
Mm.
I just want to be clear because I'm struggling a little bit over here with my role and my plate. I just want to be clear, what exactly are my responsibilities?
Mm-hmm.
Make sure I address those first.
Yes.
So coming at it from a collaborative
Yes.
point of I want what's best for the company. Like I'm not trying to out on doing my work, but asking those questions because sometimes it's honestly, I would say most times it's just
Yeah.
a misunderstanding.
Misunderstanding. I like that you frame it with a common goal because you would hope that most likely whatever manager or person you're coming to also wants what's best for the company. And so if you
Theoretically.
can frame it around some sort of common goal, we both want what's best for the company is generally a really easy one to use. I think that's really great and that's one of the keys, right? So the other thing that I want to talk about is I've managed teams. No two employees are the same, right? But some are similar. And there's this spectrum that everybody seems to be on, and some seem to be in the middle. They're really good at holding their boundaries. And then there's those who have really loose boundaries. But then there's also those who have really strict boundaries. And it's don't talk to me, don't,
Yes.
don't give me. So, what, how do you, there's a couple of different directions we can go with that. What advice do you have to those people who feel that they need to have really strict boundaries? Unfortunately, a lot of times they have really strict boundaries because of some sort of experience in the past, right? But also, what can the other team members, coworkers, and the managers of those, what can they do to help them? Do we just need to accept that's what they just have really strict boundaries and be respectful and just figure out how to work around that? How do you work that into your boundary plan or strategies?
Yeah, you're right about the spectrum. I look at it as a pendulum.
Mhm,
On one side of the pendulum swing, you've got the people pleasers. Those are
mm,
called porous boundaries.
mhm,
On the other side, you've got the rigid boundaries.
mhm,
And those are the ones that have no problems saying no
mhm.
to absolutely.
Everything.
When you look at it that way, we're shooting for this middle. Decisions are made on a case by case basis. You don't want somebody that says no to working overtime all the time. Absolutely not. I don't care if the building and the organization is burning to the ground.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm going home at 5 o'clock.
Mhm.
Do you want it to be all the time overtime? No. However, you do want someone who is a team player and
Yes.
that kind of attitude. And yeah, I would say for the most part, those people that are on that side of the pendulum, they were over here
Mhm.
and they've overcorrected.
Mhm. Yeah.
So realizing that, and the way I like to look at it as is people pleasers are very good at connecting, but they're not good at protecting. When you always say
Yeah.
no, you're very good at protecting, but you're
Mm.
not good at connecting. Okay. So for the individual people, but not people pleaser, excuse me, for the rigid boundaried person, you want to think, what are you missing out on? What are your goals? And what's is bleh. What are your goals and what are you doing that's standing in the way of that? And non-work example, I had somebody come up to me at a book fair and she goes, oh, I have no problem saying no. I say no all the time. She goes, I say no to going out. I say no to dates. She goes, of course I'm single and I don't want to be, but I have no problem
Uh,
saying no. And I was like, you
oh,
do have a problem. You
yeah.
say no too often.
Yeah. You have a problem. It may
You
not
do.
be saying no, but you do have a problem. Yeah.
Realizing what is it doing to you?
Mhm. Yes.
Are you not getting the promotion that you want? Are you not able to connect with the people that you work with and you're very like lonely and solitary?
Yes.
What is it preventing?
Yeah. What is it
And
keeping you from
exactly.
accomplishing? Yeah.
Exactly. And how can we look at everything on a case by case basis? And look, there are some boundaries that should never be changed.
Yes.
If you're not comfortable with someone at work or outside of work hugging you or touching you, hands off.
Yes.
That's totally acceptable. But there are some that are maybe you can bend a little
Yeah.
bit. So, what are those non negotiables in your life?
Yes.
And what can you maybe be a little flexible with?
Yeah, especially with personal physical boundaries. I can understand that those being hard, but hard and fast and the non-negotiables. But like you were talking about the team players, if there's some sort of emergency or some big project or something has come up and it's a all hands on deck situation, maybe you're not working until midnight, but you need everybody to stay an extra hour or two for a day or two. But then you have those are like, nope, absolutely not. So those are the ones where maybe you need to be willing to be a little bit more adaptable and flexible. Thank you so much, Sheryl. This has been a lot of fun. It's been very educational for me as well. Everybody, make sure that you check out Cheryl's latest book, You Had Me at No, available on Amazon, correct?
Yes.
And for more strategies and insights on healthy boundaries. And for more information on Scale the Chaos, you can visit our website at scalethechaos.com, or you can even find our podcast at scalethechaos.com/podcasts. I'm Rhonda Lea, and we'll chat more next time. Thank you.